This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The instant that infernal little box, my satellite guide, developed a will beyond silicon and code, I understood the trajectory of my life had irrevocably shifted. What commenced as the tail end of a mundane commute home warped into a descent through impossible geography, orchestrated by a synthesized voice, seemingly calibrated for my annihilation. Had I but heeded the primal tremor in my gut, the urge to wrench the wheel back towards the familiar glow of the interstate when the chance still flickered. My name is Reese, purveyor of prosaic office necessities, a road warrior, essentially, stitching together a living mile by tedious mile, town by forgettable town, peddling wares to businesses likely indifferent. Not a life etched in starlight, but it kept the wolves from the door, until that particular night swallowed everything. Homeward bound I was, after a week bled dry by sales pitches and lukewarm coffee. Midnight had long since struck its somber chord, fatigue a leaden cloak upon my shoulders. The highway unfurled, a slick black vein pulsing into the void. My eyelids, traitorous weights, threatened closure. A stop was imminent. And then the thought, insidious, practical, a shortcut. Slice an hour, reclaim a sliver of the night. Coordinates tapped into the navigation unit. I yielded control, the cool, placid tones ushering me from the arterial highway onto a lesser capillary road. Initially, banality reigned. The asphalt, rougher, scarred by neglect compared to the highway's smooth expanse, felt predictable enough for a back route. Trees, dense and watchful, crowded the edges, their interlocking boughs weaving a lightless tapestry overhead, extinguishing the stars. An hour drifted by under this arboreal shroud before unease began to prickle. The way narrowed, contorting into serpentine twists. My headlamps punched feeble holes in the oppressive gloom, and the device, the satellite guide, its behavior turned peculiar. Prepare to turn right in 500 feet, it intoned, the robotic cadence imbued with an unfamiliar insistence. I squinted into the murk. No intersection presented itself, only impenetrable woods. There's nothing here, I murmured, easing off the accelerator. Yet, as I drew level with the designated spot, a slender dirt track bled into existence at the road's edge, as though conjured from the shadows themselves. Doubt coiled in my stomach, my foot hovering above the brake. This felt profoundly wrong. Before indecision could crystallize into action, the guide chimed again. Turn right. Now. The command was absolute, leaving no room for dissent. Almost involuntarily, my hands obeyed, guiding the car onto the unpaved path. The instant the tires bit into the dirt, regret surged. The forest seemed to press in behind, a living wall erasing my retreat. My sedan bucked and shuddered over the rutted earth, its suspension groaning a metallic complaint. Continue straight. 7.3 miles, the guide instructed. A desperate urge to reverse, to claw my way back to known territory, warred with a strange compulsion emanating from the speaker. The voice, it seemed, had bypassed my ears and burrowed directly into my will, overriding logic. Deeper, I plunged into the sylvan labyrinth, and the world beyond my windshield began to fray at the edges of reality. Trees assumed grotesque, tortured postures, branches clawing at the night like skeletal fingers. In the strobing glare of my headlights, fleeting shapes skittered through the undergrowth, forms too vast, too alien in their contortions to be any known fauna. Sweat slicked my palms on the steering wheel. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, audible even over the engine's strained growl. Still, I drove onward. "Turn left, 1,000 feet," the voice declared, now laced with something disturbingly akin to glee. My gaze flickered left. Ice water flooded my veins. No road existed there, only a precipitous plunge into absolute blackness. "No!" the word escaped, thin and trembling. "I can't. There's nothing there." But the machine was implacable. "Turn left. Now," it reiterated, the phrase looping, escalating in volume with each repetition. I felt my own hands betray me, initiating the turn towards the abyss. A primal surge, a Herculean wrench of the wheel, snapped the car back onto the dirt track. The guide fell silent. A fragile moment of relief breathed through me, instantly shattered. "Recalculating," it announced, and I could have sworn I detected fury simmering beneath the synthesized syllables. Abruptly, the track widened, spilling into a clearing. At its heart slumped a derelict gas station, ancient and decrepit, its neon signs sputtering fitfully, casting a diseased glow. It radiated a palpable wrongness, the archetypal setting for travelers who check in but never depart. "You have reached your destination," the satellite guide proclaimed with chilling finality. I sat, engine thrumming, mesmerized by the decaying structure. This wasn't home, not even close. My hand scrabbled for my phone. No signal, predictably. Against every screaming instinct, I pushed the car door open. The air hung thick, cloying, saturated with an unidentifiable miasma. Old decay, stagnant water, something else indefinably foul. As I approached the station's grimy facade, lights flickered erratically within. Through the filth-streaked windows, a silhouette shifted. Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced my fear. Another soul. Perhaps they could orient me, dispel this nightmare. The door groaned on rusted hinges as I forced it inward. "Hello?" My voice sounded reedy, uncertain. "Sorry to intrude. I seem to be lost. My navigation unit brought me here, and My words caught, strangled, as the figure behind the counter pivoted. Humanoid, yes, but the similarity ended there. Its skin possessed a pallid, unhealthy gray stretched taut over skeletal limbs, and the face, where features should have resided, there was only a smooth, undifferentiated expanse of skin. I recoiled, a choked sound clawing its way up my throat. The entity inclined its head, regarding me with that blank, eyeless focus. Then it spoke, the voice uncannily, horrifyingly resonant with my satellite guide. "You have reached your destination, Reese," it rasped. "We have anticipated your arrival." Turning, I fled. My feet slammed against the cracked asphalt, the echo swallowed by the oppressive silence. Something pursued, its footfalls unnaturally swift, unnervingly light. I threw myself into the car, fingers fumbling, frantic for the ignition. The engine roared, a defiant mechanical scream. Shifting into reverse, tires shrieked protest as I fishtailed out of the cursed lot. A glance in the rear-view mirror seared an image onto my mind that time will never erase. The gas station was changing, its very structure warping, writhing as if alive, and from its gaping maw spilled dozens more figures, each as nightmarishly featureless as the first. I drove with the desperation of the damned, careening down unmarked paths, praying each random turn might spiral back towards the mundane world. The satellite guide remained mute, yet its voice echoed relentlessly inside my skull, a siren call urging my return, beckoning me towards my destination. How long I drove, how I eventually stumbled upon the blessed familiarity of the highway, remains a blur. Dawn was painting the eastern sky with bruised pastels when the sight of other vehicles, banal signs of human existence, finally registered. I didn't cease driving until my own driveway offered sanctuary, my hands trembling too violently to easily kill the engine. Inside, I collapsed, the fragile structure of my reality fractured by the night's ordeal. In the ensuing days, I wrestled with the experience, attempting to rationalize it as a fugue state, a waking nightmare born of exhaustion and endless asphalt. Yet, a deeper certainty resisted denial. I tendered my resignation the following day. The mere thought of returning to that car, of entrusting my direction to another machine, was intolerable. My world has shrunk now. I cling to the familiar, shun the nocturnal hours, and view any technology more complex than a rotary phone with profound suspicion. But sometimes, in the deepest watches of the night, the memory surfaces, that calm, insistent voice, the satellite guide, whispering directives, urging me to turn, to drive, to finally arrive. I ponder what awaited me had I stayed, what culmination lay within that grotesque station at the world's ragged edge. A part of me recoils, praying for perpetual ignorance. Yet another fragment, a shadowed curiosity I strive to suppress, stirs, and occasionally, when the darkness presses close and a reckless impulse flickers, my gaze drifts towards my car keys, a silent question hanging in the air. Dare I take one final drive? So, should you find yourself traversing lonely roads under a starless sky, and your navigation device suggests a deviation from the illuminated path, heed this warning. Disable it. Adhere to the known ways, the brightly lit arteries of the world, for beyond the map's edge lie territories uncharted, destinations not meant to be reached. And once you glimpse what resides at the terminus of that particular road, the concept of truly finding your way home becomes an unattainable specter. Amidst the click-clack rhythm of composing an email in my compact home office, a different sound intruded, a soft metallic whisper against the carpet pile. It startled me, a jolt in the quietude, because nothing occupied my minimalist desk space, just the monitor, keyboard, and lamp that could possibly have fallen. The room itself is little more than a nook, desk, chair, a steel filing cabinet hugging the wall. To my right, a small window frames a slice of the mundane street outside. I swiveled my head, drawn by the anomaly. There they lay, nestled beside my chair's caster wheel. The keys. A single hard thud resonated in my chest. Instant recognition. These were the keys I'd mourned, lost 2 weeks prior at a gathering in the next city over, vanished without a trace. relinquished to the realm of forgotten things. Their sudden resurrection on my office floor sent a cold clench through my gut. I rose, the motion stiff, reached down. They felt unnervingly cool in my palm, the serrated edges imprinting faint lines on my skin. The memory surfaced. Leo's birthday celebration, crammed into his modest apartment, the air thick with voices and music. Late hour, teeming space. A couple of beers had blurred the edges, yet I distinctly recalled the mental checklist. Wallet, phone, keys, all accounted for, until they weren't. A frantic search ensued. Beneath sofas, behind the toilet tank, fingers digging into upholstery seams. Queries echoed through the din. Seen a set of car keys? Small leather fob? Blank faces, shrugged shoulders. Anxiety tightened its grip. Home was an hour's drive away. Leo, ever the good host, offered his couch. The next day involved a locksmith, a new cylinder, and a precautionary police report filed for the absent keys. A week passed, hope dwindled, and I mentally wrote them off, swallowed by the city's chaotic churn. And now, impossibly, they rested in my hand. A faint throbbing began at my temples as my mind wrestled with the paradox. My phone screen showed just past 3 in the afternoon. A slow scan of the office revealed nothing else disturbed. The window latch was secure. The door to the hallway stood ajar, as always. Placing the keys carefully on the desk, I drew 2 deliberate, slow breaths, noticing the slight tremor in my fingers. The urge to call Leo flickered, then died. How to phrase it? Hey, remember those keys I lost? They just appeared on my floor. Absurdity silenced me. Later that evening, the kitchen's fluorescent light overhead gave a nervous twitch as I prepared a solitary dinner. A mere flicker initially, the kind you dismiss as a wiring quirk in an aging house. It blinked again, a more insistent stutter this time, before settling back into a steady, pale glow. I paid it little mind. Electrical eccentricities were familiar tenants here, but while I ate my hastily assembled meal, a prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being observed. My gaze darted to the empty kitchen doorway once, then twice. Nothing, just a pervasive unease coiling in my stomach, stealing my appetite. I pushed the feeling down, focusing on the texture of the food, the scrape of fork on plate. Later still, venturing into my bedroom for some forgotten item, I heard it, a distinct creak from the hallway floorboards. Old houses settle, temperatures shift, timbers groan. I knew the repertoire, yet this sound felt different, weighted, intentional. I froze, listening intently, mouth suddenly dry, pulse quickening its beat. Silence answered. Flicking on the hallway light revealed only the familiar runner, the closed doors, the vacant space. I checked the front door's deadbolt, secure. A quick walkthrough of the living room, the spare bedroom, everything ostensibly normal. Just jumpy, I told myself, rattled by the inexplicable return of the keys. The following day found me sunk into the living room sofa, the television murmuring unnoticed. My thoughts kept circling back to those keys, now residing in a small ceramic dish near the front door, a repository for loose change and stray buttons. Then, a faint, almost furtive clicking drifted from the hallway, metal lightly tapping metal. Muting the TV, I strained my ears. The clicking ceased. I rose and walked towards the sound's apparent origin, The dish by the door was still there, but the keys were not inside it. I found them several feet away, near the baseboard where the hallway turned, lying starkly on the polished wood, as if they hadn't just fallen, but been propelled, skittering across the floor. Bending, I retrieved them. That familiar coolness seeped into my hand. I tried to rationalize, to shrug it off, but a familiar pang of anxiety resonated in my chest. A new ritual began, double-checking the locks before bed, triple-checking sometimes. I started leaving the living room lamp on through the night, an extravagance I'd normally abhor, but the encroaching darkness felt different now, less empty. Sleep became shallow, punctuated by phantom noises. I'd jolt awake in the dead hours, 2 or 3 a.m., heart hammering, convinced I'd heard footsteps pacing the floorboards. A cold sweat would bloom across my skin. It's just the house settling, I'd insist silently, the pipes contracting. Sometimes I'd throw back the covers, switch on every light down the hall, and stand there, straining to hear anything beyond the frantic thrumming in my own ears. Nothing visible ever materialized, yet the chilling certainty of a presence lingered. A few days after the key's reappearance, I was back in the home office, wrestling with overdue emails. The overhead light flickered, once, twice, then extinguished completely for a beat before flaring back to life. My computer monitor never wavered. It wasn't a general power surge. The interruption felt targeted, almost playful. Rubbing my tired eyes, I tried to regain focus. Then, directly behind me, a distinct sound, the soft, rapid shuffle of feet on carpet. I launched myself out of the chair, sending it skittering backward. I spun around. Empty space stared back, my gaze fixed on the spot where the sound had originated, searching for any ripple in the air, any lingering shadow. My breathing grew shallow, ragged. I forced a deep inhale, then another. Every muscle fiber felt coiled tight. My fingers trembled uncontrollably. A sudden, overwhelming urge to flee washed over me. Grabbing my jacket, I bolted from the house. I drove aimlessly for a while, circling familiar streets. The engine's hum, a poor substitute for coherent thought. Eventually, I found myself nursing a coffee in a brightly lit cafe. Caffeine an unwelcome jolt at this hour. My mind raced, tumbling through possibilities. A hidden intruder, playing cruel games. Had I unwittingly carried something back from Leo's party, something intangible and unwelcome? The timeline gnawed at me. Keys lost in another city, vanished for 2 weeks, then manifesting here, in my locked home. And since their return, the flickering lights, the disembodied sounds, the constant, unnerving sensation of being watched. Returning home, around 7, the porch light I'd left burning cast long shadows. Stepping inside, I paused in the entryway. The air felt perceptibly colder, a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. I checked the thermostat in the hall, set to its usual temperature. I nudged it higher anyway. And then I saw them, the keys. Not in the dish where I'd left them before fleeing, but resting on the narrow console table beneath the hallway mirror. I picked them up, a strange deliberation in my movements. Their weight felt ordinary, but my thumb brushed against a faint, rough scratch on the leather fob, a mark I couldn't recall seeing before. I traced its unfamiliar texture before returning the keys. Yet again, to the ceramic dish. Making dinner felt like moving through water, every action requiring conscious effort, the silence amplifying my unease. Over the subsequent week, the phenomena escalated. Light switches became temperamental, bulbs flickering erratically until toggled off and on again. Lying in bed, hovering on the edge of sleep, I'd hear them. Distinct, measured footsteps traversing the living room floor. Slow, steady pacing. I'd sit bolt upright, adrenaline surging, listening until the silence itself seemed to ring in my ears. Subsequent investigations always yielded the same result. Empty rooms, undisturbed furniture, drawn curtains revealing only the night outside. My eyes would scan every corner, probe every shadow, expecting, dreading, to finally see someone. Always, there was only me. I attempted once to capture the sounds on my phone, but the recording yielded nothing but ambient static and the ragged pattern of my own breathing. Driven by a need for normalcy, I called an electrician. He arrived, performed his checks, circuit breakers, wiring tests, outlet inspections. Everything, he declared, was fundamentally sound. He replaced a couple of aging switches as a precaution, but found no definitive cause. Could faulty wiring cause sporadic flickering, maybe even odd sounds in the walls? Perhaps, he conceded, but it wouldn't explain footsteps. He offered a dismissive chuckle, suggesting raccoons in the attic. I don't have an attic. That evening, the lights seemed to flicker with renewed, almost mocking frequency. Sleep became a scarce commodity. I'd wake gasping, heart slamming against my ribs, convinced I'd heard breathing near my bed. A constant jitteriness settled in my limbs. My eyes burned with fatigue. Concentration at work dissolved. Staring blankly at spreadsheets, my mind would replay the cold touch of the keys, the inexplicable cold spots in the house, the feeling of unseen eyes. Paranoia became my shadow. Locks were checked obsessively. Leaving for work felt like abandoning a post. Returning home filled me with a low-grade dread. One night, mid-brushstroke in the bathroom, toothbrush foaming, a sound shattered the routine. A knock on the bathroom door, not tentative, but a sharp, peremptory knuckle against the wood. I froze, toothpaste clinging to my lips, eyes locked on the door panel. My chest constricted. The door wasn't locked. With a surge of adrenaline, I twisted the knob, yanking the door open violently. The hallway stretched before me, empty and silent, under the overhead light. Leaving the bathroom ablaze with light, I stalked through the house again. The living room lamp pulsed, a brief dimming. My breath hitched. The faint, acrid scent of my own fear sweat reached my nostrils. Forcing myself back to the sink, my hands shook so badly that flecks of toothpaste spattered the porcelain. After that night, I buried the keys deep within a drawer in my bedside table, hoping their concealment might quell the disturbances. It didn't. The lights continued their erratic dance. The phantom footsteps persisted. Once, standing in the living room, I felt a sudden, distinct rush of cold air brush past my arm, raising goosebumps. I flinched violently, nearly fumbling my phone. No window was open, no vent blew nearby, no logical source for the draft existed. My skin crawled, the thumping in my chest echoing in my ears. I fled the house again, standing on the porch, gulping the cool night air. I attempted to broach the subject with a couple of friends, framing it cautiously. Annoying electrical glitches, peculiar house noises. Their responses were practical. Check for vermin. Consider a structural inspection. I skirted the core weirdness, the spontaneous materialization of the keys. The fear of being dismissed as delusional or attention-seeking kept the strangest details locked inside. Yet deep down, a colder suspicion took root, something that defied rational labels. Those keys were lost, miles away. 2 weeks later, they were here. Everything shifted in that instant. Last night, reading on my phone in bed, trying to court exhaustion, I left the bedroom door slightly ajar, the hallway light spilling a pale trapezoid onto the carpet. A faint, persistent shuffling sound started, barely audible, slow, rhythmic, like slippered feet scuffing the floor covering. I told myself to ignore it, but the tightness returned to my chest, my breath catching. Propping myself on an elbow, I listened, straining. The sound seemed localized just outside my door. Leaning carefully, I peered through the crack. Nothing but the illuminated stretch of hallway runner. Yet the hairs on my nape prickled, my shoulders bunching defensively. A familiar pressure built behind my sternum. Abruptly, the hallway light blinked, plunging the space into momentary blackness before snapping back on. My heart gave a painful lurch. My jaw clenched until it ached. Sleep, when it finally came, was a turbulent sea. Fragmented dreams had me wandering the house endlessly, flipping switches that refused to stay on, lights that died the moment I turned my back. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, my t-shirt clinging damply. Staring at the shadowed ceiling, a profound dread settled in my stomach, heavy and cold. Whatever hitched a ride with those keys, I thought with chilling certainty, wasn't inclined to leave. I've contemplated discarding them, tossing them into a river, burying them somewhere remote. But a sliver of fear holds me back, the worry that severing the connection might provoke something worse. Part of me still clings to logic, searching for a mundane explanation. A prank, a forgotten return, stress manifesting as hyper-awareness of normal household quirks. But then a light flickers with uncanny timing, a floorboard groans under an unseen weight, or that icy current brushes my skin in a sealed room and the fragile structure of reason collapses. I remember the jolt of seeing those keys on my office carpet, the precise moment the wrongness began. I've rearranged furniture, deep cleaned closets, performed small rituals of reclaiming space, desperate to break the oppressive tension. Still, it lingers, a palpable weight in the air, especially after dark, a feeling that I am not entirely alone. And so I sit here now, back in the small office where it started, typing these words, seeking solace in articulation, trying to maintain composure, hoping for a rational dawn. But with every flicker caught in my peripheral vision, every anomalous creak that deviates from the house's familiar groans, the memory floods back, the shock of recognition, the cold metal in my palm, and the chilling sense that when those keys reappeared, the locks on my reality silently, irrevocably changed. Safety feels like a forgotten language in this house now. "9:45. Through the grand library windows, the campus cafe surrendered to the night, baristas performing their final rites over gleaming steel counters. 15 minutes shy of freedom, Professor Alistair Finch's voice still unwound the intricacies of cognitive psychology. Another evening destined to unfold without the warm armor of caffeine. Night classes offered intimacy of scale, the luxury of prime parking. Their price was paid in navigating the crepuscular gloom that swallowed the city whole by six, especially now, deep in autumn's grasp. The path homeward measured 20 minutes along the main arteries, 15 through the shadowed residential veins. Yet tonight, poised at the heavy glass doors of the lecture hall, a peculiar stillness held me captive. Alara. The air hung thick, expectant. The street lamps cast a sallow, diminished glow. Around me, classmates dissolved into the night, echoes fading towards the parking structure. I cinched my backpack, a familiar weight, and stepped onto the path. 10 minutes flowed uneventfully, past the stark geometry of the chemistry block, skirting the silent student union, crossing through the iron campus gates. The darkened panes of the coffee shop threw back a solitary reflection. Just as I neared Hawthorne Lane, my usual shortcut, a ribbon of cracked pavement and whispering trees, peripheral motion snagged my attention. Across the asphalt river, two figures ambled, 30 feet back, perhaps. But the gait, it was wrong. Too measured for the hour, too deliberate. A dissonant note in the night's quiet symphony. Forward, my own pace instinctively quickened. Theirs answered, a syncopated rhythm mirroring my own stride across the damp pavement. A cold prickle traced my spine as they angled across the street, vectoring directly towards me. Paranoia, a small voice insisted. Just locals. Yet a glance over my shoulder confirmed the tightening proximity, the undeniable purpose in their advance. One gaunt towering, the other compact, dense with muscle. Dark fabric swallowed them, hoods casting their faces into premature night. My phone felt cold, alien, in my trembling hand. I raised it to my ear, pitching my voice into a calm fiction. Hey, nearly there, yeah. The silence on the other end hummed back. 5 minutes, tops. Still waiting outside. The words felt brittle, hollow. The pace didn't falter. If anything, it intensified. Options warred within me. Hawthorne Lane beckoned, the swift path home, yet notoriously dim, flanked by student houses, mostly vacant for the looming break. The main boulevard meant exposure, an added 10 minutes, but light. A passing car's headlights swept across the scene, briefly etching their faces, intent, fixed solely on me. No chatter between them, no casual glances, just the unnerving focus of predators. Decision forged in adrenaline, not Hawthorne, straight ahead towards the bright confluence of the main intersection. Behind me, a low curse sliced the air, their footsteps hammered now, shifting from pursuit to chase. My fingers fumbled with my phone, map app struggling to orient. Then a memory surfaced. Mrs. Anya Petrova, from down the block, describing the hidden network, the labyrinthine passages behind the old houses, her dog walking shortcuts. Just ahead, nestled between a shuttered patisserie and a silent bookstore, a narrow opening breathed darkness, haloed by security floods. Without a second thought, I plunged in, my walk fracturing into a run. The alley birthed a small, echoing courtyard before splintering. Right, right again, left. Behind, the pursuer's steps reverberated off brick, amplified yet somehow hesitant. They hadn't anticipated this detour. Ahead, the familiar silhouette of Anya Petrova's rose-trellised wall. One more left, then straight through to Sycamore Avenue. Lungs screamed for air, but raw adrenaline fueled my flight. The pursuing echoes grew fainter, swallowed by the maze. A sudden glare, motion sensor, momentarily bleached the world white. Vision returning, I saw it. The mouth of Sycamore Avenue, 50 feet away. Beyond, the reassuring pulse of traffic, the movement of people. I erupted from the alley's narrow confines onto the broader pavement, stumbling almost into a cluster of students migrating towards the late-night beacon of the campus diner. Their startled faces registered my panic. Followed, I gasped. Instantly, they became a shield, absorbing me into their midst, guiding me towards the diner's warmth as one dialed campus security. Within the diner sanctuary, saturated with the aroma of frying bacon and percolating coffee, the tremor finally eased from my hands. Uniformed campus security materialized swiftly, their calm professionalism a balm. They recorded my fractured narrative, then methodically swept the alleyways. No trace of the hooded figures remained, vanished back into the urban shadows. Patrols, they assured me, would be increased. The following day became an exercise in reclaiming territory. I meticulously charted every artery and capillary between the university and my apartment, annotating well-lit stretches, high traffic zones, the unblinking eyes of security cameras. Most crucially, I documented the alley network, photographing each entrance, each exit. This cartography of safety became my new shield. Anya Petrova, upon hearing my story, galvanized the neighborhood. Motion-activated lights bloomed in the passages. A phone tree sprang into existence for late-night walkers. Small green lamps appeared on porches, silent promises of refuge. Help available here. My peers rallied, forming walking cohorts, sharing locations, weaving a net of mutual vigilance. Professor Finch began concluding his lectures 5 minutes sooner, allowing a collective exit while the campus cafe still glowed. The university, spurred to action, extended shuttle routes and hours, installed emergency call boxes like watchful sentinels, and initiated an escort program for students navigating the nocturnal campus. The most profound transformation, however, occurred within. Night classes remain part of my schedule. The familiar streets still trace my route home. But I walk them differently now, alert, equipped, armed with the certainty of escape routes. A personal alarm rests in my pocket. Self-defense techniques learned at the student center are etched into muscle memory. Fear hasn't vanished, but it no longer dictates. It advises. Last week, when a new face in cognitive psychology voiced anxieties about the late walk, I didn't recount my terror. Instead, I unfolded my map of illuminated paths. I connected her with our walk collective, pointed out Anya Petrova's network of green lights. I explained the alleys, not as zones of dread, but as potential conduits to safety, if navigated with awareness. Because the lesson etched into me that autumn night was this: security isn't solely the absence of threat. It's woven from environmental knowledge, from heeding the whispers of intuition, from the vital threads connecting us to community. Sometimes, the deepest shadows birth the most resilient bonds, transforming dark passages into illuminated pathways and strangers into unexpected guardians. Elias remembers precisely when the strangeness began, the first tremor in the smooth surface of reality. Scarcely 2 weeks passed. Deep in the hush of evening, the bathroom lights hummed with a cold, clinical glare. He'd just navigated the ritual of brushing his teeth, the minty foam expelled into the basin. Leaning forward, rinsing, he straightened, meeting his own gaze in the glass. Familiar territory. He blinked, a natural, unconscious flutter. Yet, the face staring back hesitated, its own lids descending a heartbeat later, a minuscule, almost imperceptible lag. Fatigue, he'd reasoned, or perhaps a trick of the tired eye, such a slight aberration, easily dismissed. He shrugged, the water swirling down the drain, carrying away the toothpaste, but leaving behind that first seed of unease. Dawn broke, filtering weakly through the blinds. Elias shuffled into the bathroom, sleep still clinging to him like mist. The light flickered on. He peered into the mirror, searching. His reflection seemed utterly mundane. A raised left hand prompted the expected mirrored right, all placidly normal. Stepping closer, his scrutiny intensified, eyes bloodshot from restless sleep, skin pallid beneath the harsh light. Every detail held true. A slow turn of his head, left then right. The image flowed in perfect synchrony. No ghost in the machine. Relief washed over him, a cool balm on nascent anxiety, and he left the room feeling momentarily grounded. 2 days hence, the dissonance returned. He stood before the tall, leaning mirror in his bedroom, a silent sentinel against the wall. It served its purpose, reflecting his daily choices in attire. This time, adjusting the collar of his shirt, a flicker caught his attention. His hands dropped to his sides, yet for the barest fraction of a second, the mirrored hands seemed suspended, reluctant to follow. He stared, hard. The reflection returned his gaze, impassive, perfectly ordinary, but the momentary lag echoed in his mind. Rubbing his eyes, he looked again. Simultaneous movement, imagination surely. A tired brain's sluggish response. He forced the thought down. A few more days slipped by. Elias stood at the bathroom sink, face lathered with shaving cream. The razor glided with deliberate slowness, a careful navigation across his jawline. The mirror, inches away, held its captive image, mimicking his cautious strokes. He rinsed the blade under the tap, the water rushing, then glanced up. In that instant, he felt, rather than saw, his reflection's eyes lock onto his, not merely matching his gaze, but meeting it, focused, intent. It felt as though the reflection initiated the contact, a split second before his own awareness registered looking. He froze, razor poised, mid-air. He raised his eyebrows, twitched his mouth, tilted his head slightly. The reflection mirrored each nuance flawlessly, yet the unnerving sensation lingered. It was observing him, not just reflecting. His breath quickened, a tightness constricting his chest. Abruptly, he shut off the faucet, leaving the shave unfinished, retreating from the room. In the days that followed, Elias tried suppression. Avoid the mirrors, a futile endeavor. They lurked in the bathroom, the bedroom, even darkened window panes at night threw back distorted likenesses under the interior lights. He began averting his gaze, refusing eye contact, with his own image. Yet, necessity forced encounters, washing his face, combing his hair, checking for stray food particles, and with each reluctant glance, tiny, unsettling discrepancies surfaced. Once, raising a hand to scratch an ear, he felt a distinct, infinitesimal delay in the reflection's response. Another time, blinking rapidly several times, the mirrored face missed one flutter entirely, simply didn't blink. He recoiled from the glass, standing breathless in the hallway, heart hammering. Was he fracturing? He rubbed his eyes fiercely, counted to 10, a ritual against encroaching madness. Returning to the mirror, everything appeared synchronized once more. But the knowing had taken root. Something was fundamentally wrong. A palpable tension now coiled within him whenever he neared a mirror. A queasy knot formed in his stomach. His palms grew damp. His pulse accelerated. He fought to maintain composure, to act normally, but relaxation was impossible. Logic insisted mirrors were passive reflectors, inanimate objects bound by physics. His own senses screamed otherwise. A week later, the unease sharpened into dread. Back from a walk, shirt slightly damp, sleeves rolled high, Elias stood washing his hands in the bathroom. He twisted the faucet shut, looked up. The reflection met his gaze, steady, direct. He shifted his head tentatively. It followed, perfect mimicry. He glanced down at the porcelain sink, then snapped his head back up. The reflection's eyes were still fixed on his, unwavering, as if they had never looked away to follow his own downward glance. A chill traced its path across his skin. He stepped back, staring intently. One hand raised, then the other. The synchronicity was restored, flawless, yet the feeling persisted, cold and certain. The reflection had been watching him, independently, while his own eyes were elsewhere. He drew a ragged breath through his mouth, fighting rising panic. He had to be sure. A deliberate test. He fixed his gaze on his feet, holding it for several seconds, then jerked his eyes back to the mirror. For one blinding, crystalline moment, he caught it. The reflection's eyes locked onto his face. Before, its posture snapped into alignment with his own. A split second, no more, but it was definitive. Whatever inhabited that glass was not merely copying, it was aware. A profound disquiet settled deep in his bones. He backed out of the bathroom slowly, eyes riveted to the mirror, watching the figure retreat with him. A perfect, untrustworthy echo. That night, sleep was a distant shore. Elias lay rigid in bed, staring into the oppressive darkness. Every light extinguished. The bathroom door firmly shut, a flimsy barrier against the unseen watcher. Nervous tension knotted his shoulders and neck. His throat felt parched. He swallowed repeatedly against the dryness, the frantic thump of his pulse loud in his ears. Closing his eyes brought no peace, only the vivid image of that reflected gaze, waiting, patient, for him to look away. Sleep eventually came, but it was thin and fraught, punctuated by sudden awakenings, sweat-slicked skin, and gasping breaths. Morning arrived, heavy with resolve. Elias rose and walked purposefully to the bathroom. He stood before the mirror, squared his shoulders, and met the reflection's eyes. Silence stretched between them. He simply watched, waiting. If it intended some new strangeness, he would face it directly. Minutes crawled by. He raised an arm, lowered it. The reflection complied, turned his head side to side. Perfect synchrony. Opened his mouth, closed it. Flawless. 5 minutes passed, maybe more, the tension making his back ache. Then he repeated the test, a quick glance away, feigning interest in the countertop, followed by a swift return to the mirror. And there it was again, undeniable. The reflection's eyes already fixed on him, adjusting a fraction too late. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. Jaw tightening, he leaned closer, seeking any minute delay. He raised his right hand, slowly, deliberately. The reflection's left hand rose, in perfect time. Fingers wiggled, mirrored perfectly. He tried blinking erratically. This time, the reflection matched him. Blink for precise blink. He exhaled slowly through his nose, leaning closer still, perhaps 6 inches from the glass. He could discern every pore, the intricate map of his own skin. He stared into the reflection's eyes. They were his eyes, yes, but imbued with an alertness, a focused intensity that felt alien. Then, abruptly, shockingly, the reflection smiled. A small, fleeting upturn of the lips, almost a smirk. Elias hadn't smiled. His own face remained a mask of tense neutrality. He jerked back, freezing mid-step, his heart hammered against his ribs. Instantly, the reflection's expression matched his own again, neutral, tense. But he had seen it, that brief, independent smile. What now? Sweat beaded on his forehead. His breathing grew labored. Looking away, then snapping back, perfect mirroring, the smile vanished as if it had never been. He stumbled backward out of the bathroom, slamming the door shut, pressing his back against the cool hallway wall. He stared at the closed door, gulping air, trying to quell the rising panic. The image of that grin burned behind his eyes. His face, yet utterly not him. His chest felt crushed. Nausea churned in his stomach. His hands shook uncontrollably. He resolved to shun the bathroom mirror for the day. The kitchen sink served for hand washing. The tall bedroom mirror went unregarded. He kept the apartment lighting dim. The small television screen offered faint reflections, but nothing clear, nothing whole. He tried busying himself with mundane tasks, washing dishes, straightening books, futile attempts to distract a mind consumed by the impossible. The smile. Brief, yes, but undeniably real. Late afternoon shadows stretched across the floor. The need to know, a dreadful counterpoint to his fear, became unbearable. He had to confirm it again. With a sense of grim compulsion, he returned to the bedroom, standing before the tall mirror. Soft light filled the room. His reflection stared back. Jeans, plain t-shirt, utterly normal. He raised a hand, mirrored, turned his head, mirrored, a small, experimental jump, mirrored, perfect fidelity. He locked eyes with the image, waiting. His stomach twisted, palms slick with sweat. He waited, bracing himself. 2 minutes, perhaps longer, stretched taut. Then, it happened again. The reflection's mouth curled, that same quick, knowing grin flickering across its features for less than a second. Elias leapt back, as if struck. He hadn't smiled. He pressed his lips firmly together, shook his head violently, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The reflection matched him perfectly. Impassive, no trace of the abhorrent smile. Shaking, he retreated from the mirror's unsettling presence. He paced the apartment, his gaze now snagging on every window. Nightfall would turn them into dark mirrors, reflecting the lit interior. Anxiety tightened its grip, covering them. That was the only way. He fetched a towel, returned to the bathroom. Holding the terry cloth shield before him, he peered one last time at the mirror. The reflection stood calmly, mimicking his posture. He hesitated, then swiftly draped the towel over the glass, pressing it flat. A wave of fragile relief washed over him. Hidden, he went to the bedroom, pulled an old bedsheet from the closet, and similarly shrouded the tall mirror, ensuring complete coverage. The tension eased slightly. Out of sight, perhaps out of mind. He slumped onto the couch, switching on the television, keeping the volume low. He tried to lose himself in the flickering images, the disembodied voices, but his thoughts inevitably circled back to the hidden watchers lurking behind cloth barriers. He knew they were there, knew that uncovering the glass would reveal those eyes, that stare, perhaps the grin, perhaps something worse next time. He became acutely aware of every gleaming surface, the microwave door, the dark screen of his phone, the glass protecting a framed photograph, potential portals. He found himself consciously looking down, focusing on matte textures, avoiding anything that might throw back his own image. Sleep remained elusive that night, even with the mirrors veiled. Sweat pooled, waking him repeatedly. The apartment's nocturnal creaks and groans sounded like stealthy movements. Paranoia gnawed at him. Had the covering slipped? He rose once in the darkness to check. The towel and sheet remained firmly in place. Minimal comfort. The following morning, driven by a weary resignation, he knew he had to look one more time. He pulled the towel from the bathroom mirror, stood before it, bracing himself. The reflection appeared normal. He tried the look-away, look-back maneuver. Perfect mirroring. He waited for the smile. Nothing. He made a sudden gesture, raising both arms quickly. Matched. Opened and closed his mouth. Synchronized. He stared into his own eyes, waiting, vigilant. After several tense minutes, it reappeared, the faintest twitch at the corners of the reflection's mouth, blooming into that fleeting, unmistakable grin. He stumbled back, catching himself on the door frame as he nearly slipped on the rug. The reflection mirrored his stumble perfectly, but the preceding image, that independent, deliberate grin, was seared into his mind. It wasn't his. With trembling hands, he replaced the towel, smoothing it flat against the glass. He backed out of the bathroom, the decision solidifying into grim certainty. All mirrors, all significant reflective surfaces had to be covered. He scoured the apartment, draping cloths, taking down framed pictures, storing them away in closets. He minimized his own image wherever possible. The bathroom mirror remained entirely off limits. Quick, furtive glances into his phone's front camera became his only concession to vanity. He existed this way for days. The tension never fully dissipated. The memory of the grin remained, a persistent, chilling echo. It was real. He had no explanation, no theory, only the stark, visceral knowledge of what he had witnessed. Something resided within those reflective surfaces, something aware. He couldn't look without feeling scrutinized, judged. He feared that sustained attention might provoke it further, coaxing it beyond a mere smile into something truly monstrous. What that might be, he couldn't fathom, nor did he wish to. Now, he sits here, recounting this, surrounded by shrouded glass, hoping that neglect might starve the phenomenon, force it back into simple mimicry. Things are far from normal. A low hum of anxiety underlies every waking moment, but he will not uncover those mirrors again. The certainty of what he saw, his own face smiling back at him, unbidden, is enough. Curiosity is dead. Fear and exhaustion remain. He never wants to see that grin again. The clock hand nudged 11, its passage marking the commencement of my nightly vigil. Tuesday draped the grand lobby in its customary quiescence. Positioned near the revolving glass doors, I offered a brief inclination of my head to a departing guest, then indulged in a slow, deliberate stretch, coaxing the stiffness from my shoulders. Elias is the name stitched onto my uniform jacket, a name synonymous with this hotel's nocturnal hours for nigh on 4 years. My tenure typically involved navigating the predictable shoals of inebriated patrons, misplaced key cards, and the infrequent, quickly quelled lobby spat, a rhythm comfortable in its monotony, until several nights passed when the predictable cadence fractured. The lift began its peculiar performance in the deep hush of the pre-dawn hours. Initially, I dismissed it as fatigue, playing tricks on my perception, but recurrence bred certainty. The elevator was making unscheduled stops on a floor that, officially, did not grace our blueprints. Let me recount the genesis. Around 2 a.m, ensconced in my usual station adjacent to the reception desk, surveying the cavernous, unoccupied space, my gaze drifted, unbidden, to the elevator's digital indicator panel, a small rectangle of light above the polished brass doors. Numbers ascended, descended, blinked, the mundane ballet of vertical transport. Then, an anomaly. The digits illuminated 13ths, a fleeting spark before the panel went utterly dark. I blinked, rubbed at my eyes. This establishment boasts 12 floors. 13 is conspicuously absent, a concession to the owner's triskaidekaphobia, a common architectural quirk in venerable buildings like this one. Though I harbor little personal superstition, the deviation registered instantly. I traversed the marble floor to the elevator bank, summoning the car. The door slid apart with a pneumatic sigh, revealing an empty, normally lit cabin. Puzzled, I stepped inside, pressed the button for the 12th floor. The ascent was seamless. On 12, I disembarked, paced the corridor. Familiar patterned carpet, the low hum of the vending machine alcove, the regulated glow of sconces. All was in order. No stray guests, no disturbances. Descending again, I convinced myself it had been a momentary misreading, a trick of tired eyes. The subsequent night, vigilance became my watchword. I leaned against the cool mahogany of the front desk, arms folded, eyes locked onto the elevator panel's iridescent numerals. Guests ebbed and flowed. The midnight exodus from the ground floor lounge occurred, depositing a few unsteady patrons into the lift's embrace. Then, closer to 1:30, the indicator climbed to 12, lingered, and then that spectral flicker, 13, present for perhaps half a second before extinguishing. A jolt, visceral and sharp, shot through me, like missing a step in the dark. My heart gave a frantic leap. Without conscious thought, I strode towards the elevator. As if beckoned by an unseen hand within, the doors parted before I could press the call button. Empty. Again. Night 3 demanded investigation. I resolved to provoke the phantom. Near 2, the lobby utterly still, I entered the elevator cabin. Methodically, I pressed each floor button, 2 through 12, observing the panel during each ascent and descent. No aberration. The mechanism performed flawlessly. By 3, I was leaning towards dismissing the whole affair as an intermittent electrical gremlin, ready to relegate it to the back of my mind. But as I stepped back into the lobby, the doors whispering shut behind me, I glimpsed it through the narrowing gap. 13 flared briefly on the panel before vanishing. The car ascended without me. A tremor ran down my spine. My palms grew damp. I jabbed the call button repeatedly. The elevator returned, vacant as ever. I boarded, propelled by a mixture of dread and an insatiable need to understand. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I pressed 12, then waited, bracing myself. Floors ticked by, 2, 3, 4, up to 12. The car halted. The doors remained sealed. Inside the cabin, the panel above the door flickered erratically, jumping from 12 to 13. Then, with a soft chime, the doors slid open. My breath caught. Before me lay a corridor bathed in a dim, uncertain light. The very geometry felt wrong. The walls seemed subtly canted, inducing a faint vertigo. The carpet underfoot looked threadbare, worn in ways the other floors were not. An odor permeated the air, stale cigarette smoke, interwoven with the damp, musty scent of neglected textiles. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my sternum, threatening a headache. Tentatively, I placed one foot onto the strange threshold. The air felt heavy, resistant. Overhead lights buzzed with an unnerving frequency, one bulb sputtering intermittently. Doors lined the hallway, mirroring the layout of the floors below, yet they appeared coated in a fine layer of dust, their brass handles tarnished and dull. I swallowed against a suddenly parched throat. A fine tremor started in my hands. I clenched them into fists. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet curiosity, potent and insistent, drew me onward. I tried the nearest doorknob, locked solid. I proceeded cautiously, testing each door along the way. All resisted. Silence reigned, broken only by the persistent electrical hum and the sound of my own shallow, rapid breathing. Halfway down the corridor, a flicker of movement at the periphery of my vision, near the far end. A shadow? A reflection in a darkened window I hadn't noticed. My stomach clenched. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear them, but the space was empty when I looked again. A glance back revealed the elevator doors, still open, patiently waiting. A primal urge insisted. Go back. Now. I turned, hastened my steps, and re-entered the metallic sanctuary. I stabbed the lobby button. The doors closed with unnerving smoothness. The panel above blinked once, displayed 13 inks, then transitioned to 12, and began its swift descent. 11, 10, down to 1, then L. The doors opened onto the familiar brightly lit ground floor. The air felt clean, almost bracing. I stepped out, legs unsteady, pulse racing. Leo, the night clock, dozed lightly behind the counter, oblivious. No one else witnessed my return. The following night, I fought to suppress the memory, attributing it to exhaustion and overactive imagination. Yet, as 1 o'clock approached, a familiar tension coiled in my chest, an anticipation of the elevator's inevitable transgression. Coffee became my ally against encroaching drowsiness. My eyes darted to the panel with every ascent and descent. Around 2:15, it happened. 12, pause. 13, gone. I gritted my teeth. Walked to the lift. Summoned it. Empty. Always empty. I stepped inside, a strange lightheadedness washing over me. I pressed 12. The sequence repeated. Arrival at 12. The pause. The flicker to 13. The opening onto that warped corridor. This time, I forced myself further. The doors remained open for a few heartbeats, then slid shut behind me without any input. The sound rattled my composure, but I pressed on, stomach churning. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. Each door remained stubbornly locked, bearing chipped paint and those tarnished knobs. The overhead lights buzzed their discordant tune. A low hum vibrated through the walls. Ventilation, perhaps, but distorted, wrong. Deep breaths did little to steady me. My legs felt leaden. Placing a hand flat against one of the doors, I pushed. A faint click, but no give. Then, a dull thud echoed from somewhere ahead. I froze, every muscle taut. My palms were slick. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I tried to call out a test, but my voice failed. One hesitant step forward. The carpet yielded strangely beneath my shoes, as if padded with something thick and uneven. The musty odor intensified, coating my tongue with the taste of dust. Another thud, closer this time. Wiping my damp hands on my trousers, I advanced a few more paces and rounded a corner. A short tributary hallway branched off, terminating at a single door marked only by a dark, featureless metal plate. No number. A storage space, I surmised. I stood about 6 feet away, observing it, my breath loud in the oppressive quiet. My hand resumed its trembling. Stepping closer, I reached for the handle. It felt unnaturally cold, slick, like metal long untouched by human hands. The door groaned open under my tentative push. Inside, a cramped room illuminated by a single, bare bulb dangling from the ceiling. Peeling wallpaper, patterned with faded Cthulhu-esque flowers, clung precariously to the walls. The air hung thick and stale, redolent of soiled laundry sealed away for too long. A small table occupied the center, flanked by a few mismatched chairs. Dust lay thick upon the table's surface. One chair was pulled slightly away, angled towards a corner. I circled it cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. Footprints marred the dust, faint, indistinct, and definitely not matching my own regulation shoes. They led towards the corner where the chair was angled, and simply ceased. A wave of pure, icy dread surged from my gut to my throat. I backed out of the room, pulling the groaning door shut, and hurried back down the main corridor, seeking the elevator. The hallway seemed to stretch, elongating before me. The lights flickered more violently now. My pulse surged anew. Finally, the elevator doors appeared at the far end, closed. My walk became a near run. I jammed my finger against the call button, the silence amplifying the ringing in my ears. An eternity seemed to pass before the doors finally slid open. I practically lunged inside, fumbling for the lobby button, my shaking hand nearly striking the wrong one. The panel blinked, 13 tirage to 12, then the rapid cascade downwards. When the doors opened onto the ground floor lobby, I stumbled out, gasping. The reassuring normalcy of bright lights and clean carpets allowed my muscles to unclench. I swiped my sleeve across my damp forehead, casting furtive glances around. Leo remained engrossed in his computer screen. A lone guest sat absorbed in their phone. No one seemed to have noticed my disheveled state. I retreated to the staff restroom, locked the door, and splashed cold water onto my face. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed, my shirt clinging damply under my arms. Leaning against the cool porcelain sink, I forced myself to breathe deeply until the trembling subsided enough to return to my post. Later that same shift, near 3:30, the panel flashed its forbidden number again. 13. This time, I remained rooted to the spot. I watched, waited. The elevator descended to the lobby, paused, and the door slid open, presenting the empty cabin like a silent dare. My heart hammered a heavy rhythm. No more unplanned excursions. I held my ground. After several seconds, the doors closed autonomously, the panel reverting to its usual display. Over the ensuing nights, the pattern persisted. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, the inevitable flicker from 12 to 13, the silent opening onto that distorted reality. I ventured back twice more, brief reconnaissance missions. Each time, new details registered. The cloying sweetness of decay stronger near certain doors. A damp patch spreading on the ceiling in one section, causing the paint to bubble. The walls themselves seeming to breathe. Never another soul encountered. Only sounds. A faint scraping noise. A distant bang. Each sending jolts of adrenaline through me, making my limbs feel strangely hot. The pervasive sense of dread was inescapable whenever I crossed that threshold. One night, I mentioned to Leo, the clerk, my suspicion of an electrical short, some mechanical tick in the elevator, citing odd noises. He offered a non-committal shrug, mumbled something about reporting it to maintenance, a process we both knew was glacial for non-critical issues. For guests, the elevator behaved impeccably, never betraying its secret. The phenomenon reserved itself for the quietest hours, for an audience of one. Leo, seldom straying from the desk, displayed minimal interest. I began actively avoiding the elevator bank after 1 a.m., busying myself with trivial tasks, polishing brass fixtures, straightening tourist brochures, meticulously organizing the lost and found drawer. Anything to occupy my hands and divert my attention. Yet, awareness of the lift remained a constant pressure at the back of my mind. At some point, inevitably, it would signal 13 traits. A knot of tension permanently resided between my shoulder blades. My legs ached from enforced stillness. Last night pushed the boundaries further. Approximately 2:45. Panel sequence 12. Flicker 13. Proof. I needed tangible proof. Retrieving my phone, I activated the camera's video function and stepped into the waiting elevator. Pressed 12. As the doors opened onto the warped hallway, I began recording, the phone's beam cutting a swathe through the gloom. I moved slowly, the familiar tightness constricting my chest, past the locked doors, down towards the side corridor. The unmarked room stood as before. Inside, the same faded footprints leading to nowhere. Then, a sharp, scraping sound directly behind me. My blood ran cold. I spun around, phone held high, catching only the empty stretch of corridor receding into shadow. Nothing. Muttering curses under my breath, I panned the camera across the peeling wallpaper, the tarnished door handles, the buzzing lights. My mouth was desert dry, my scalp prickling with the undeniable sensation of being observed. I backed away slowly, the phone unsteady in my grip. Reaching the main corridor, I saw the elevator doors were shut. I stabbed the call button, the indicator light blinking mockingly slowly. Waiting felt like an agony. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced something would emerge from the shadows. My own heartbeat was a deafening drum. Finally, the door slid open. I scrambled inside, slapping the lobby button with frantic relief. The panel showed 13, then 12, then descended rapidly. Emerging into the lobby felt like surfacing for air after being held underwater. I rushed to the front desk, heart pounding, and checked my phone. The screen displayed only swirling static, a blizzard of corrupted pixels. The audio track was a cacophony of pops and crackles, devoid of discernible sounds from the hallway. No image of the corridor, just digital snow. My hand trembled as I locked the phone, shoving it deep into my pocket. A wave of nausea washed over me. I remained behind the desk for the remainder of my shift, exchanging no words, my gaze periodically drawn, against my will, to the silent elevator. It did not repeat its performance that night. When 7 o'clock finally arrived, signaling freedom, I exited the building with undue haste. Sharing this experience seems futile. Disbelief, accusations of stress, or worse, of fabrication, would surely follow, but the reality of it clings to me. The thick, resistant air of that hallway, the lingering, phantom scent on my uniform, the echoes of those thuds and scrapes, the warped perspectives, the flickering illumination, the eternally locked doors. I have no intention of setting foot on that floor again, not willingly. Yet, the nature of my job offers no guarantees. If the elevator summons 13 courts again, my plan is simple. Stand fast in the lobby, feign ignorance, maintain composure, survive the shift. That is the extent of my strategy. Should the elevator call, I will refuse the invitation. Some doors are best left unopened, some mysteries best left unsolved. What resides on the 13th floor, I do not know, and a growing part of me is terrified to find out. A curt nod passed between Elias and the groundskeeper. Silas, a man weathered like the stone facade he guarded. Silas offered a gruff syllable of greeting, then gestured Elias towards the yawning entrance of the derelict manor. Years of neglect had steeped the place in silence. Elias, a structural surveyor, was tasked with plumbing its depths, assessing its bones for a potential resurrection as a grand event space. A straightforward inspection he'd anticipated, walls to scrutinize, beams to probe, fissures to document. 5 hours, perhaps 6, ensconced within its decaying grandeur, then back to the breathing world. Yet, the threshold yielded more than anticipated. A miasma, thick with the ghosts of old textiles and the damp breath of mildew, clung heavy in the foyer. The air itself felt weighted, stagnant. Silas cast a final lingering glance towards Elias before retreating outside, phone pressed to his ear. A soft thud resonated behind Elias. The great doors had swung shut, sealing him within. A constriction tightened his chest, a fleeting disquiet he consciously suppressed. Igniting his torch, its beam slicing through the gloom, he advanced into the main artery of the building. How far did this behemoth sprawl? Floorboards groaned the ancient complaints beneath his boots. Plaster wept from the walls in pale, powdery tears. Dust lay like a shroud over every surface. Vast corridors branched off, tendrils leading to forgotten wings, where, Elias recalled being told, opulence once reigned. Gilded balls unfolded beneath glittering chandeliers, patrons swathed in silks and velvets, lost in dance and revelry. Now, the chandeliers were shattered specters or vanished entirely, leaving only tattered remnants of fabric, skeletal furniture, and that pervasive scent of time-locked closets. Veering towards a cavernous chamber on the right, Elias's light snagged on something adorning the walls. Art, perhaps, or some peculiar, original embellishment. Closer inspection dissolved that notion. Masks. Scores of them stared back, their features warped into unsettling parodies of expression. Mouths twisted askew, eye slits narrowed into malevolent slants. Some bore traces of intricate craftsmanship, yet dust and encroaching shadows lent them all a uniform disquiet. Elias drew a sharp breath, the stale air catching in his throat. His stomach clenched. Their arrangement felt deliberate, haphazardly artful, hung at varying heights, some tilted, others missing fragments, chipped paint revealing the dark wood beneath. He swept his beam across the silent assembly, noting in his log, wall masks, possible original fixture, assess salvage potential. He pressed onward, deliberately sidelining the unnerving contours from his thoughts. He stepped into what must have been the grand ballroom. The ceiling soared into darkness, punctuated by the stark geometry of exposed beams far above. The pervasive dampness intensified here, amplifying the sound of his own respiration into hollow echoes. Then, a prickle of ice traced his nape, not a draft. The air remained thick, immobile. He froze, straining his ears against the profound silence. No footfalls, no scuttling vermin, just the absolute stillness of abandonment. His pulse quickened, a frantic drum against his ribs. Just the oppressive atmosphere, he reasoned, the building's personality seeping into his nerves. Pivoting, he raked the room with his flashlight. Across the expanse, near a jagged wound in a window pane, his breath hitched. Propped against an overturned chair, leering in the focused beam, was one of the masks from the corridor. Its expression was a carved sneer. He was certain, utterly certain, it hadn't been there moments before. Had he dislodged it inadvertently, brushed against the display? No, he'd been meticulous, touching nothing. Swallowing thickly, he forced himself to record the anomaly. Mask located on ballroom floor. Potential detachment from wall mount. He crossed the room, the mask drawing his steps. In his grasp, the wood felt unnaturally cold, its surface coarse. The eye holes were stark, rectangular voids. An aversion coiled within him. It felt like holding a severed face, lifeless, yet somehow observant. Turning it away, he carried it to a nearby table, depositing it with reluctant care. "Keep moving," he commanded himself. He examined the ornate columns, noting the insidious spread of rot in the woodwork. He captured images with his phone, his torch beam probing cracks in the plaster, testing the floor's integrity with tentative steps. Perhaps 30 minutes later, thirst drew him back towards the foyer where he'd left his water bottle. Passing the mask-lined corridor, a dissonance registered. Something was amiss. His gaze scanned the unsettling array until it landed on a conspicuously empty hook, a vacancy where a mask had surely hung. Tension seized his arms. He rubbed the back of his neck, fighting for composure. Perhaps it was the one he'd found. Logically, yes. Yet the explanation felt thin, unsatisfying. After a long draught of water, he resolved to investigate the left wing. Silas had mentioned a smaller parlor and storerooms there. He navigated a narrower passage, the walls closing in, the musty odor deepening. Damp patches stained the floor, the boards yielding alarmingly beneath his weight. His flashlight sputtered. He tapped it sharply, muttering a curse as the beam steadied. The parlor emerged from the gloom, smaller, intimate, draped in fabrics that might once have been crimson but had surrendered to a bruised, brownish hue. A cracked looking glass leaned wearily against the far wall. Chairs huddled in a corner like forgotten supplicants. And there, on a dusty side table, lay more masks. They shared the same disturbing aesthetic: jarring angles, peculiar eye slits, mouths frozen in silent distortion. He averted his gaze quickly, scribbled notes on the room's state, and retreated. Time bled away. His phone displayed the hour. Past 6. Silas had planned to secure the premises by 7, but Elias, needing more time, had received a heavy ring of keys. "Lock the main doors tight when you leave," the caretaker had instructed. "I'll be back for them. Come morning." Silas had vanished into the twilight, leaving Elias the sole possessor of the decaying giant. The prospect of remaining after dark held little appeal, but the evaluation demanded completion. By 8, the world outside was an inkwell. The manor, devoid of power, surrendered entirely to the night, forcing reliance on his torch. He stood in a secondary ballroom, meticulously recording column dimensions and ceiling heights, when that glacier touch revisited his neck. This time, the fine hairs there lifted. A faint sound accompanied it, the whisper of fabric dragging across the floorboards. He spun, his light cutting a frantic arc through the emptiness. Nothing, only motes of dust dancing in the beam. His heart hammered against his ribs. Wind through a broken pane. A stray piece of drapery shifted by his own movement. He saw no evidence of either. A profound unease settled over him. It was time to conclude for the night. He began the trek back towards the main hall, navigating the treacherous terrain of loose planks. His flashlight flickered again, more violently this time. Another tap, then a frustrated slap. Darkness consumed him. He swore, fumbling for his phone, its screen casting a weaker, colder glow. In the reduced light, every creak of the floorboards amplified, each sigh of the old house resonating like a deliberate utterance. He wiped perspiration from his brow, the silence pressing in. Entering the main hall, his phone's beam snagged on something near the wall. The mask, the same one, the sneering grotesque. It lay flat on the floorboards directly in his path, facing upwards. He halted, the light trembling slightly in his hand. He had placed it on a table hours ago. He was sure of it. Now it lay here, positioned as if awaiting his return. The tightness returned to his chest, sharp and painful. His breathing grew shallow. He approached cautiously, kneeling for a closer look. Dust coated its surface, the rectangular eyes seeming to fix on his own. A wave of visceral revulsion washed over him. An object, nothing more, yet it felt expectant. Reaching out with the hand that shook, he lifted it again. Rational explanations warred with rising dread. A slanted floor. Vibrations. He stood, holding the mask at arm's length. Then his gaze lifted to the wall display. Not one, but 3 hooks now stood vacant. He hadn't registered the others earlier. He swept the phone's light around the immediate area. No other masks lay scattered on the floor. A new resolve formed. Return it to the wall. Hang it securely. See if it remained. He started back down the corridor, the mask held before him like a morbid offering. Each footstep echoed unnervingly, the air feeling thick, resistant. Reaching the designated section, he located an empty hook and carefully positioned the sneering visage upon it. The moment his fingers relinquished their grip, a violent shiver coursed through him. That pervasive sense of being watched intensified. His breath hitched, his palms grew slick with sweat. He stepped back, fixing the mask in his phone's beam. It hung there, inert. Forcing himself to turn, he resumed his path towards the exit. The foyer materialized around the corner. With Silas gone, no ambient light softened the gloom, save for the faint, spectral glow of distant street lamps filtering through the door's glass panels. Relief surged, fragile but welcome. Nearly 9 o'clock. He moved quickly towards the main doors, retrieving his backpack from where he'd left it. He fished the heavy keys from his pocket, clicking off his phone's light momentarily, testing the ambient illumination. He could just discern the hulking shapes of furniture, the dust-laden reception counter, and then a flicker of movement to his right. Phone light flared back on, aimed instinctively. Nothing, just a narrow hallway, its walls shedding plaster like diseased skin. He realized he was trembling and clenched his jaw, turning his attention back to the door handle. He pulled. The door yielded slightly, then jammed fast. He worked the key in the lock. Rusted tumblers resisted. Another curse escaped his lips as he jiggled the key forcefully. A click sounded, but the door remained stubbornly wedged, opening no more than a sliver. Debris outside, perhaps. Impatient, unwilling to wrestle with it further, he relocked it and recalled Silas mentioning secondary exits. A small service door near the restrooms. Yes, he remembered seeing it. He turned back into the manor's depths. Navigating the umbral corridors once more, he toggled his phone's light, conserving its dwindling power. His own breathing seemed unnaturally loud, his footfalls echoing like accusations. The musty scent intensified near the restrooms, the odor of decay and forgotten things. He found himself back in the masked corridor. He tried to keep his gaze averted, but morbid curiosity drew his eyes to the wall. He scanned the unsettling faces, counting absently. His count stopped short, an empty hook near the end. He looked closer, his blood running cold. The sneering mask. It was gone. Again. His lungs felt constricted. Fresh sweat prickled his forehead. He stood utterly still, listening, every nerve straining against the silence. He felt horribly exposed. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Just a building," he whispered, the words sounding hollow, unconvincing. An old, empty building. He directed the light downwards. Footprints marred the thick dust. His own boot marks, clear and distinct. But alongside them, other impressions. Strange, sliding trails. Partial outlines he couldn't decipher. His heart hammered violently. He forced himself forward, towards the promise of the side door, towards escape. The corridor seemed to stretch infinitely. Finally, he reached the area near the restrooms. The side door stood at the corridor's terminus, heavy, dark wood, clearly less frequented. He hurried towards it, relief surging, only to falter. Leaning against the wall, just beside the doorframe, was the mask, upright, positioned. Its empty sockets stared directly at him. A strangled gasp escaped his tight throat. His hands felt clammy, useless. Ignoring it, focusing solely on the door, he grasped the handle. It turned. The door creaked open a few inches, then stopped dead. Blocked from the outside, a fallen branch Rubble. He threw his shoulder against it. It barely budged. He kicked at the base, frustration mounting into panic. It wouldn't yield enough to allow passage. He stepped back, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His shirt clung damply to his skin. His mouth was parched, each inhalation drawing in the stale, cloying air. He risked a glance at the mask. Motionless, yet its presence felt like a physical weight, a malevolent glare. His mind raced, frantically seeking alternatives. Windows. Some were boarded, others broken. He backtracked rapidly, his phone's battery indicator now a glaring 15%. He found a tall window in the hallway, its latch crusted with rust. He wrestled with it, throwing his weight against the frame, until, with a screech of tortured metal, it gave way, opening a narrow gap. Faint city lights glimmered beyond, blocked by a heavy metal security grate. He struck it with his palm, solid, immovable, without tools. Panic, raw and suffocating, washed over him. His face felt flushed, his breathing rapid and shallow. Phone out, he tried Silas. No signal. Thick walls, maybe. A text message failed to send. Nearly 9:30. Stay calm. Find another way. Perhaps force the main door after all. He spun, his light sweeping the corridor behind him, and froze. The mask, on the floor again, mere feet away. Face up, his legs turned to water, a sickening lurch in his stomach. How? He hadn't heard a thing. Logic deserted him, replaced by primal terror, screaming at him to flee its presence. Stumbling backward, he collided heavily with the wall, his phone nearly slipping from his grasp. He righted himself, heart convulsing, and forced his legs to move, skirting wide around the obscene object. Don't touch it. Don't look. Just get out. Back in the main foyer, he threw himself at the front doors again, shoulder impacting wood, grunting with exertion. Still, only that mocking inch of movement. Trapped. The word echoed in the cavernous space. His chest ached with the force of his heartbeat. His body vibrated with tension. Break a window. Near the entrance, smaller panes. He spotted a heavy wooden chair in the corner, hefting it, surprised by its weight. Arms shaking, he swung it against the glass. A spiderweb of cracks appeared, but the pane held, reinforced with wire mesh. Again, he swung, grunting with the effort. More cracks, a few shards tinkling to the floor, but the wire held fast. 3, 4 more desperate impacts yielded only a ragged hole, perhaps the size of a football, too small to crawl through. The frame stubbornly bolted. He lowered the chair, panting, sweat stinging his eyes. His arms burned. His heart felt dangerously overtaxed. Silence descended again, thick and watchful. He felt it now, undeniable. He was not alone. Phone battery, 10%. He paced the foyer, light dancing erratically over walls, ceiling, floor. Dust motes swirled like disturbed spirits. Silas wasn't coming back. He had to survive until morning. Find a defensible spot, or break the window wider. He needed leverage, something heavier. A fruitless search yielded only decaying brooms and fractured furniture. The mask intruded on his thoughts. The vacant eyes, the twisted rictus, deep breaths, focus. He eyed the damaged window again. He could do this. Lifting the chair once more, summoning reserves of strength, he aimed for the weakened edges, smashing it again and again. Glass rained down. Wires buckled, tore. He kicked furiously at the frame's base. Metal groaned, screws protesting as they pulled from the plaster. The opening widened, slowly, agonizingly. A sound scraped behind him, wood dragging on wood, every muscle locked. He whirled, phone light stabbing the darkness. Near the reception desk, a dark shape resolved itself. The mask, lying there, stark against the dusty floorboards. It hadn't been there seconds ago. Cold dread slicked his neck. His hand trembled, keeping the light fixed on the object. He stood frozen, the frantic thudding in his ears the only sound for a long moment. Logic, reason, they offered no solace now. Escape by any means. He seized the chair again, attacking the window frame with renewed ferocity. Glass shards flew, biting at its exposed skin. Wires ripped free. Ignoring the sting, breathing in ragged bursts, he finally tore the metal frame halfway from the wall. A gap, tight but possible. Outside, the sidewalk beckoned, bathed in the cool promise of night air. Relief flooded in his chest. He turned for his backpack. Just a second, and saw it. In the phone's dying beam, the mask sat upright beside the reception desk, turned towards the window, watching. A spike of pure, unadulterated fear lanced through him. No more time. Backpack forgotten, he scrambled, twisting his body through the jagged opening. Broken glass snagged his jacket. He stumbled out onto the pavement, the cool air a shocking balm on his overheated skin. His hands shook violently. Small cuts oozed on his arms, but he was out, free. He staggered upright, staring back at the looming, silent edifice. Through the shattered window, he thought he could just make out the faint shape of the mask, still sitting by the desk. Or perhaps not. He didn't wait to confirm. He ran, feet pounding the sidewalk, not daring to look back until he reached the sanctuary of his car. He threw himself inside, slammed the locks, engine roaring to life. His heart still felt dangerously erratic. One last glance at the building. Dark, inert, seemingly empty. Yet a chill remained, deep in his bones. Gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, he took several shuddering breaths and wrenched the car away from the curb. He drove, fast, wiping sweat from his face. The image of those empty eyes burned into his mind. The report could wait. All that mattered now was distance, putting as much of the night as possible between himself and that hole and its damnable watching masks. A knot cinched tight within my chest the instant my tires crunched onto the gravel shoulder. The air hung heavy, sodden, thick with the scent of decaying timber and sodden earth. Silas's cabin perched precariously where the trail steepened into wilderness, huddled beneath pines so dense they bled into the bruised twilight sky. Above, the mountain's peak vanished into slow, churning vortices of mist. Relaxation, I tried to tell myself. That was the objective. Yet my gut twisted. A cold counterpoint to the day's lingering warmth. Just fatigue from the drive, I reasoned, though the mountain itself radiated a profound disquiet. Silas materialized beside the car, a hearty clap landing on my shoulder. "Get inside," he boomed, his voice slightly muffled by the encroaching vapor, "before this soup swallows us whole." Wordlessly, I trailed him onto the narrow porch, its ancient planks groaning a protest beneath our weight. Inside, the space felt constricted, a diminutive living area bleeding into a cramped kitchen, one bath, 2 sleeping quarters. Silas declared he'd been escaping here most weekends, extolling the virtues of the vistas, the clarifying power of profound isolation. My gaze swept over dust-furred shelves, a bare bulb flickering fitfully overhead, curtains thick as shrouds. A staleness permeated everything. Still, I forced a semblance of ease. We deposited my duffel in the guest room, then settled at a scarred table for a hasty meal. Through the window panes, I noticed a film of condensation, an external breath fogging the glass despite the mild temperature. "Happens," Silas offered breezily when I pointed it out. "This mist works its way into every nook." He waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing to it." Later, retreating to my room, I anticipated slumber. Instead, the wind rose, a restless keening through the high branches. My window, left slightly ajar, admitted a chill draft that traced patterns on my cheek. The cabin itself seemed to sigh and settle with each powerful gust, a rhythmic sequence of creaks, silence, then deeper groans. I lay rigid, tracking shadows on the ceiling, consciously slowing my breath until, sometime past midnight, exhaustion finally dragged my eyelids shut. How long I slept remains uncertain. A peculiar coldness, sharp against my skin, jolted me awake. Ethereal white tendrils drifted lazily inside the room. I pushed myself upright, blinking against the disorienting haze. Beside my bed, a silhouette solidified. My heart began a frantic drumming. My mouth turned to dust. It possessed the unmistakable shape of a person, utterly still. A choked gasp escaped me, but I was otherwise frozen, locked in a staring contest with the darkness. Shoulders, a head, arms hanging limp. The form was distinct, yet featureless, a sentinel in the gloom. A scream clawed at my throat, voiceless. Tremors seized my hands, slicking my forehead with sweat despite the glacial air. My fingers, clumsy with panic, fumbled for the bedside lamp. I flicked the switch. Light flooded the small space. The shape evaporated. The mist lingered, swirling faintly, but the room was empty. Perched on the mattress edge, I rubbed furiously at my eyes, the frantic pulse in my temples echoing the beat in my chest. A trick of the light, surely. A waking dream fragment. Altitude, humidity, some atmospheric anomaly conjuring phantoms. I compelled myself back beneath the covers, pulling them tight to my chin, eyes scanning the shadowed corners, until the first gray hints of dawn softened the dark. Over breakfast, I ventured the question, had Silas ever witnessed anything unusual? He chuckled, a dismissive shake of his head. "All in your head, mate. Altitude does strange things. Dehydration. Fog plays tricks." I didn't press the point, though the unease remained, a cold residue. My hand still held a faint tremor. Silas handed me a water bottle, suggesting a brisk hike might clear the cobwebs. Agreeing, hoping the exertion might indeed dispel the lingering dread, I followed him outside. We embarked on a slender path, winding through the pines, our footfalls muffled by a thick carpet of fallen needles. Fog drifted in lazy swathes, sometimes pooling around our ankles, sometimes lifting like sheer curtains. I tried anchoring myself to the physical, the pressure of boots on yielding earth, the nascent burn in my calves, the sharp snap of a twig underfoot. The wind, however, remained capricious, stirring the mist into unpredictable eddies. Silas moved with an easy familiarity. But each time my gaze strayed towards the swirling canopy overhead, that dull pressure returned to my chest. An hour's trek brought us to a small clearing, a supposed vantage point. Today, it offered only shifting, featureless white. It felt like standing at the precipice of oblivion. The wind howled, yet visibility extended barely a few feet. "Turning back," Silas announced, adding with a wry grin. "Not exactly prime viewing conditions." I nodded, distracted. A faint sound had snagged my attention, a low, indistinct murmuring, like voices carried on the wind. I strained to locate the source, but it seemed omnipresent, woven into the fog itself. Too faint for words, yet undeniably human in timbre, like the distant hum of a crowd. "Hear that?" I asked. Silas shrugged. "Wind in the trees makes funny echoes when the fog's this thick." I tried to dismiss it, but as we retraced our steps, the murmuring coalesced, swelling into a soft chorus of overlapping cries, not loud, but distinct enough to raise the hairs on my neck. A sideways glance confirmed Silas remained oblivious, focused solely on the path ahead. A wave of nausea washed over me, accompanied by a sudden, icy sweat. My pace quickened involuntarily. "You okay?" Silas called back. I managed a nod, murmured an affirmative, but panic was tightening its grip. Back within the cabin's confines, relief washed over me, potent and immediate. Even the musty air felt preferable to the boundless, whispering fog. Silas offered coffee, and we sat again at the worn table. He fiddled with an old radio perched near the window, coaxing crackling static, and the faint, intermittent voice of a distant announcer discussing an incoming storm front. It was mere background noise. The disembodied voices echoed in my mind, their reality stubbornly uncertain. Later that afternoon, Silas attempted to salvage the mood, suggesting a visit to a nearby cascade. I demurred, pleading fatigue, and he set off alone. Left to the cabin's heavy silence, I eventually stepped onto the porch for air. The fog had momentarily retreated from the immediate vicinity, revealing the warped wooden steps and a patch of stony ground. Drawing a deep breath, I sought calm. A faint, rhythmic dripping drew my attention to the side of the cabin. Water trickled from a sagging gutter, pooling darkly at the foundation. The damp scent of earth intensified. Behind me, a branch cracked. My pulse leapt. I spun around. Nothing but trees dissolving into mist. Yet, the distinct sensation of being watched prickled across my shoulders. My muscles tensed. I stood rigid, waiting, listening. When only silence answered, I retreated inside, bolting the door firmly behind me. As afternoon bled into evening, the sky deepened to slate. Silas returned, reporting the waterfall diminished to a mere trickle. "Feeling better?" he inquired. I offered a non-committal shrug. He proposed a fire, and I readily agreed, craving the tangible comfort of warmth and light. We gathered logs, coaxed flames to life in the small hearth, and settled onto the sagging couch. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows. Conversation dwindled. Watching the flames writhe offered a brief respite, a fragile sense of normalcy. But after sunset, the fog returned, pressing against the window panes like a tangible entity, transforming them into luminous, blank rectangles. The temperature plummeted. Silas bid me good night and retired. I lingered by the dying fire before finally stilling myself for bed. My room felt colder, the chill more penetrating than before. I ensured the window was latched tight. Nevertheless, a thin ribbon of mist curled insistently beneath the door. My heart rate quickened. I wedged a towel against the threshold, a futile barrier. My throat felt constricted. Turning off the lamp, I burrowed beneath the blankets, straining against the darkness, listening to the unsteady rhythm of my own breath. An hour, perhaps more, passed. Then, the draft returned, colder still. The towel at the door was visibly damp, the fog seeping past it. I sat bolt upright. At the foot of my bed stood 3 figures, motionless. Their outlines, though faint within the pervasive haze, were undeniable. Shoulders, heads, indistinct forms cloaked in shadow. My stomach lurched. Adrenaline surged, hot and metallic on my tongue. My chest seized, breath catching painfully. I wanted to cry out for Silas, but terror sealed my lips. The fear that any sound would animate them, draw them closer. With trembling desperation, I reached for the lamp again. Its sudden glare bleached the room. Empty. The fog eddied, but the figures were gone. My hand shook as I snatched my phone from the nightstand. No signal, just a barren icon. I flicked the lamp off, then on. Off. On. A frantic test, probing the darkness. Sweat trickled down my spine. Nothing reappeared. Eventually, I lay back down, but sleep was impossible. My heart a frantic prisoner in my ribs. Morning found me raw and exhausted. I confronted Silas directly, stating flatly, "There were people in my room last night." His response mirrored his earlier dismissals. Illusions, fog, altitude, my mind fabricating terrors. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, as if my fear were a personal affront to his mountain sanctuary. A powerful urge to flee warred with a stubborn refusal to be defeated, a need to prove my sanity to myself. Silas left for supplies. I stood on the porch, gazing at the peaks shrouded in gray, the oppressive weight in the air unchanged. On impulse, I decided on a solitary walk. Grabbing a flashlight and water, I chose a different trail, one descending into the woods. The path was narrower here, strewn with loose rocks and treacherous roots. The fog enveloped me swiftly, reducing my wood to a few yards of visibility. Silence reigned, broken only by my own crunching footsteps. Then they began again, the voices. Softly at first, a sibilant whisper on the edge of hearing, then swelling, rising and falling in waves, until it felt as though I stood amidst an unseen multitude. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dizziness threatened. I crouched low, sweeping the flashlight beam through the opaque air. It illuminated only shifting veils of white. "Hello?" My voice emerged small, quavering. The echo returned, distorted, alien. Whispered responses seemed to answer, unintelligible, yet intentional. Panic surged, raw and primal. I turned, scrambling back the way I came, each step leaden, feet slipping on the slick decay. The wind intensified, and the voices seemed to ride upon it, a chilling ululation. My hands trembled violently as I kept the flashlight beam fixed on the treacherous ground. Bursting back into the cabin, I slammed the door and threw the bolt, leaning against it, gasping for breath. My clothes clung, damp and cold. A deep chill settled in my bones. Silas returned an hour later, laden with groceries. I recounted my experience, the words tumbling out in a rush. He listened, a furrow of concern on his brow, but his skepticism remained palpable. He reiterated his theories: altitude, cold, sensory deprivation. Exhausted, I offered no further argument. One more night, then I would leave. That evening, we attempted distraction with an old movie on a portable television, the picture flickering through waves of static. It provided a temporary, fragile shield against the encroaching dread. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window frames with renewed fury. Around 10, Silas retreated to his room. I remained hunched before the dying screen until my eyelids grew heavy. Entering my bedroom, I saw the familiar dampness staining the floor near the threshold, smelled the cloying odor of wet fabric. I checked the window latch again, stuffed a fresh towel against the door crack, changed into dry clothes, and crawled beneath the covers, leaving the lamp burning defiantly. I focused on regulating my breathing, my eyes stinging with fatigue. Sometime later, I must have drifted off. My eyes snapped open. The lamp still glowed, but the room was thick with fog, a palpable entity. The coldness on my face was sharp, invasive, and they were back, closer this time. 2, perhaps 3, standing silent and still, the outlines gaining a terrifying solidity in the hazy light, scarcely an arm's length away. A tingling sensation crawled across my scalp. My chest constricted violently. Thought dissolved into pure, instinctual panic. I flailed for the lamp switch, my trembling fingers initially missing the small toggle. When I finally managed to plunge the room into darkness, the figures vanished with the light. Flicking it back on confirmed their absence. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. Sleep was now unthinkable. I spent the remainder of the night sitting upright, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide, scanning the dim corners, anticipating their return. By dawn, my eyes were bloodshot, my body leaden with exhaustion. "I'm leaving," I told Silas, my voice flat. He attempted persuasion, suggesting one more night might break the spell, but my resolve was absolute. His opinion no longer mattered. I packed swiftly, purposefully, and walked out to the car. Standing beside the driver's door, I cast a final look towards the summit, its peak lost within the heavy gray shroud. The air felt dense, suffocating. For a fleeting moment, carried on the wind, I thought I heard them again, those faint, drifting cries. Nausea churned. I wrenched open the car door and slid inside. Silas offered a hesitant wave from the porch. The engine turned over, a welcome roar shattering the silence. One last glance at the cabin, receding in the rearview mirror, and I drove away. As the rough mountain track descended, my heartbeat gradually slowed, the fierce tension in my shoulders easing degree by painful degree. With each mile, the fog thinned, relinquishing its grip. Reaching the main highway felt like surfacing, the sight of sunlight shafting through scattered clouds, a physical relief. I could breathe again, truly breathe. What transpired on that mountain remains an enigma. Silas would call it hallucination, a byproduct of altitude and fear. I remain unconvinced. That place wasn't empty. It felt aware, its presence a constant, watchful weight. I harbor no intention of ever returning. Even now, the memory of those silent, fog-bound figures sends an icy shiver down my spine. Some places are best left undisturbed, their secrets kept at a permanent, safe distance.